Hey guys, I'm down here in the Beaver Lodge Forest, just a few minutes from my place. This is like my sanctuary. I don't get down here nearly as often as I like, but it's my favorite place. And I was going to talk about John the Baptist this week, but that just wasn't coming together. Every time I tried to work on it, all I could think about were three very serendipitous things that happened to me in the space of a week and a half a while back. So I thought, well, I guess that's what I'm supposed to talk about. So I came down here for a walk one day. Um, I had wanted to come with a friend. I tried calling several friends and they were all on holidays, and I was just feeling kind of lonely and isolated because my social life mostly consists of visits to my doctor these days. My doctor's great, so that's cool, but still, I wanted to go for a walk with a friend, and that didn't work out. So I came down here, and when I'm down here, I never want to go home. It's just so beautiful. And the part of the trail up ahead is always so enticing. Just the way the light shines through the trees and stuff. It's just like, oh, I have to go that far. And I get there. And then I'm like, oh, just up ahead. And I keep going. And I end up pushing too hard and wearing myself out and paying for it later. But that's okay because it's worth it. So I was doing that and going a little farther and a little farther. And I knew I should turn around because otherwise it would get really hard to get home. But I was on this trail just up that way I didn't know this trail. It's off the beaten path and it's pretty overgrown and people don't really use it. And so there was this bend up ahead and I didn't know what was past it. So I'm like, I'm just going to go that far and then I will go home. So I got up to the bend and suddenly there's this flurry of wings in my face. I had roused an owl that was napping in a tree by the path, and it flew out like 3 or 4 feet in front of my face. And the cool thing is, it's completely silent because owls have different feathers than other birds. They're just more feathery, and it makes them really silent. So even though these big wings are beating right in front of my face, not a sound. It's really cool. It flew up ahead and perched in another tree just off the path. So I followed along and little noises. I'm self-conscious about people hearing me recording. Anyways, so I walked up to where I was parallel with the owl, and it was only maybe 15 feet off the path and not very high up in the tree. It was close enough I could see the individual feathers on its head. So I just stood there and it just sat there and we just watched each other. And it was really cool. There's something really special about just looking a wild animal in the eyes. So that was really neat. We had our little moment and then I turned around and went home. To add to the serendipity, just before that, I was right where I'm sitting right now, actually. I had found a feather on the ground and it was unusual. I didn't recognize it, so I picked it up. Later, I looked up the owl. It was called a barred owl, and the feather matched the bird. So I have that cool feather. About a week later, totally unrelated, but bear with me here. I was reading 12 Rules for Life, An Antidote to Chaos by Jordan Peterson. It's a great book. To me, Jordan Peterson is on par with C.S. Lewis, who is my all-time favorite author. So I was reading his book, and he mentioned a book by Dostoevsky called Notes from Underground. So when I'm reading a great author and they mention another book, I take note and I usually put that on my reading list. So I thought, okay, Notes from Underground. Gotta read that if I can find it because the library here doesn't have much in the way of books. It's frustrating. The next day, I was sorting through the Little Free Library box, which is just a few blocks away. And as I've mentioned before, it's generally full of pulp fiction and there's often nothing worth taking home. So I'm looking through it, and what should I find but Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So I was pretty excited. I grabbed that, and it wasn't just that book. It was a volume containing excerpts from some of his other works, including a piece called The Grand Inquisitor. So I brought that home, put it in line to read after Peterson, and I carried on with the book. And Jordan mentioned another book by Dostoevsky called The Brothers Karamazov, and in it, one of the brothers is telling a story to his younger brother, and that story is called The Grand Inquisitor. So I put down Peterson. Instead of reading his summary of the story, I just picked up my new copy of Dostoevsky and read it firsthand. So that was really cool. A few days later, I was doing my Exodus study. I've been doing a pretty in-depth study on the book of Exodus using a commentary by a guy named A.W. Pink. Now, I've noticed that prominent Christians, well, particularly theologians and big famous evangelists, like TV evangelists, often have really odd names. I don't know why, but a while ago I came across a couple that are making a financial killing off of their ministry, and I kid you not, their last name is Dollar. Anyways, that's off topic. So I was reading Mr. Pink, and he cites a verse, John 12:24, which says, "Unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it produces much grain." Half an hour later, I'm scrolling on Facebook and come across the exact same verse that a friend had posted. So I was like, okay, I hear you, God. What are you getting at? What are you trying to say? And it took me a whole day to connect the dots. And then I remembered that the day before, on the Friday, I had released my first poetry video with my poems Spectres and Coda, which are basically about death and resurrection or new life coming out of death. So that fit perfectly. And so there were these three things, and I was just feeling like this is a lot of coincidence. And sometimes all the coincidences are just too much to be coincidental. So I started thinking about it. I'm like, what are you up to, God? And I mean, the sum total of these three things is kind of obvious. I mean, just God's constant presence and care in my life, and his involvement in all the details. So, that's always nice. I think the light's changing here. Maybe that's better. And the three things on their own. Well, the owl, that was just like a special gift from my father who knows what's special to me. Birds have always been special to me. I hate to see a bird in a cage or with its wings clipped. And encounters with birds have happened at interesting moments in my life. It's kind of a recurring theme. So there was that. And then the book, obviously, I could say more about the book once I've finished reading it. But just the fact of finding the book was like God's affirmation of my efforts to educate myself. I always wished I could have gone to college, and that kind of got derailed by my health issues. And one of my biggest regrets is having taken a bunch of spares in grade 12. I thought that was cool back then, but it was really stupid, and I really regret it. Although with my health going downhill, I don't know if I would have finished school if I had a full course load. Anyways, so these days I am doing what I can to remedy that and to learn history, philosophy, literature, languages, and there is so much available. It can be done. It's great. And so finding that book was just like God smiling on my efforts to educate myself, and just his involvement with that. Then the verse, well, it's obviously an encouraging thing, life out of death. And I've had a lot of death in my life, metaphorically speaking, in a lot of different areas. And so it was just kind of encouragement that that good things will come out of that will be fruitful, that it's not just all lost, who knows, maybe even some of my long buried dreams might be resurrected. I don't know. But it was encouraging. And so, like I said, I had no intention of sharing any of this. I just felt compelled to. It just seemed like what I was supposed to do. So here we are. Maybe next week I'll talk about John the Baptist. Maybe not. Anyways, until then, God bless you and keep you. I love cool people. There's a house just up here with an apple tree and a sign on the fence that says, "Free apples, pick at your own risk." And they've got a ladder for you to use in the yard. So I'm gonna go get myself some apples. I've just been munching on salal berries and blackberries and those tiny little red huckleberries. And it's funny because I go to someone's house or a restaurant and I can't eat anything. And I go outside and there's just snacks everywhere. I love it. So I'm gonna grab some apples now.